It was a stormy night in October when Jake was driving home from a late shift. The rain came down in thick sheets, his wipers barely keeping up. As he neared an isolated stretch of road, his headlights caught the figure of a woman in a white dress, standing at the edge of the highway, soaking wet. He slowed down, rolling his window down slightly. "Need a ride?" he called out. The woman nodded and climbed in without a word. Her long, dark hair stuck to her pale skin, and she shivered violently. "Where are you headed?" Jake asked. "Just up the road," she murmured, barely audible over the rain. He drove in silence, the tension thick in the air. Every so often he glanced at her. She never met his eyes, just stared at the dashboard. Then, as they neared a narrow bridge, she suddenly spoke. "Slow down here, people have died on this bridge." Jake instinctively let off the gas. At that moment, his headlights revealed a massive fallen tree blocking the road. If he had been going any faster, he would have crashed straight into it, likely over the edge. He turned to thank the woman, but she was gone. The passenger seat was completely dry. Jake sat frozen for a moment, trying to process what had happened. Later, he learned that years ago, a young woman had died in a car accident on that very bridge. Locals said her spirit would appear on rainy nights to warn drivers, just like she had warned him. Emily lived alone in a small, one-bedroom house at the edge of town. The neighborhood was quiet, and on rainy nights, the streetlights cast eerie shadows through the windows. One night, as she lay in bed reading, she heard it, a faint tapping at her window. She dismissed it at first, assuming it was just rain against the glass. But then, it came again. Rhythmic, deliberate, tap, tap, tap. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she turned her head toward the window. Through the dim glow of the streetlight, she could make out a shape. A man, standing just outside. Heart pounding, she reached for her phone and dialed 911. As she whispered to the operator, she forced herself to keep her eyes on the figure. The tapping continued. Then, suddenly, the man grinned. Not a normal grin. A stretched, unnatural one. His lips curled wider than they should have been, his teeth glinting in the faint light. Then he spoke, but his lips never moved. "I see you." A blood-curdling chill ran down her spine. She turned away just for a second to grab something, anything, to defend herself. When she looked back, the man was gone. When the police arrived, they found wet footprints leading away from her window. The chilling part? They never found any footprints leading to the window. It was as if the man had just appeared out of nowhere. Mark was a delivery driver, used to driving in bad weather. But on one particular rainy night, something happened that shook him to his core. He was on a deserted road when he saw a little girl, no older than 7, standing by the side of the road in a nightgown. She wasn't crying or shivering, just standing still, staring at him. Alarmed, he pulled over and rolled down his window. "Hey, sweetheart, are you lost?" The girl tilted her head but said nothing. The rain soaked her hair, yet she didn't move to wipe it away. Mark hesitated, then got out of his truck, keeping a cautious distance. "Do you need help?" he asked again. The girl finally pointed toward the trees. Mark shined his flashlight in the direction she pointed but saw nothing. When he turned back to her, she was gone. His heart hammered. There was no way she could have run that fast. Then, he heard a whisper right next to his ear. "Come play with me." Mark spun around, but there was no one there. Shaken, he ran back to his truck and sped away. Later, he learned from a local that years ago, a little girl had drowned in a nearby river during a storm. Some drivers still claim to see her standing by the roadside, always waiting and always watching. It was past midnight, and Lisa was driving home through the storm. The rain was relentless, hammering against her windshield. She was exhausted, barely keeping her eyes open, when she noticed something strange. In her rearview mirror, she saw a shadowy figure sitting in the back seat. Her heart nearly stopped. She slammed on the brakes, gasping for air. When she turned around, the seat was empty. Breathing heavily, she tried to convince herself it was a trick of the dim streetlights and rain-streaked glass. She kept driving, but then movement again. This time she didn't look back. Instead, she watched the mirror closely. The figure was there again, closer. Lisa's hands shook as she whispered, "I'm just tired. I'm imagining this." But then the figure grinned. Not through its own reflection, no. It grinned through hers. Lisa screamed and swerved off the road. The next thing she remembered was waking up to flashing blue and red lights. A concerned officer was knocking on her window. "You're lucky," he said. "A few more feet, and you'd have gone down the ravine." Lisa nodded, still shaken. She didn't tell him about the figure, but when she looked into her rearview mirror one last time, she swore she saw it, watching her. Josh had just moved into a new apartment. The old brick building had a leaky roof and a flickering hallway light, but the rent was cheap. That first night as rain poured down, he was lying in bed when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It was soft but steady, coming from his front door. Checking his phone, he saw it was 3:12 a.m. Hesitant, he got up and peered through the peephole. No one was there. Figuring it was just the wind or a prank, he went back to bed. But the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it sounded closer, more urgent. Josh grabbed a baseball bat and flung open the door only to find an empty hallway. The rain outside cast eerie shadows through the window at the end of the corridor. He stepped out cautiously, looking both ways. Then he saw it. The wet footprints. They led from his door but not to it. As if someone had walked out of his apartment, but never in. That was when he realized he had never locked his door before going to bed. He turned back slowly, dread creeping up his spine. The door was wide open, and the lights inside had just gone out.